Hi, this is Jordi from Agents at Work, and today we are here with David from Aomni. Hi, David.
Hey, Jody.
David, I met you about 1 year ago at an AGI house. Back then, you were working already on some kind of scraper for AI agents. So you have been interested in AI agents for quite a while. So we always start the podcast with the same question. What's an AI agent for you?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question that everybody's trying to figure out. I think it's kind of a moving target, but essentially, I think you could think about it in two ways. You could think about it as a new UX paradigm, so as a new species of software where the user will interact with it in a different way. And you can also think about it in a technical sense. So I'll start with a technical definition, which is essentially it's a piece of software where instead of hard coding individual kind of business logic like your typical software, so if you take any software you have today, it's basically like a UI plus some business logic on top of a database. On a high level, that's basically what like all SaaS software is today. And AI agent is you kind of add like a little bit of determinism in different places. And what's interesting about about the AI models of today versus the ML models of yesterday is the AI models of today is very good at sort of figuring out long tail use cases, right? So even use cases that it haven't seen before. So it's almost like, think about almost like a self-driving car for software, right? So, you could give the AI agent a high level goal, right? Go and research this company or go on like find me some leads or kind of like, support this customer, whatever it is, right? It's going to try its best to accomplish our goals. If it hit any roadblocks, like if an API errored out or if the customer right, says no, whatever it is, it's going to try to work itself around that roadblock, right? And use a different set of tools or, kind of use, take basically take a different path. The same way that a self-driving car, like, kind of swerves around any obstacles. It doesn't matter if that obstacle was in its training data or not. It's very good at generalizing. So it's very good at handling the edge cases. So that's my technical definition. And I'll give you kind of my UX definition real quick, which is that, I also do just see it as a new species of software in that, I think we more or less I work I build software for B2B, so I'm just going to purely talk about B2B products. But I think we basically have reached peak SaaS. I think everybody's tired of using your standard SaaS software, and everyone's tired of like filling out forms and dealing with input fields and checking checkboxes. Like it's all just the same thing. So AI agents is also just from a UX perspective, just another way of interacting with software way. So obviously chat, I think is kind of the popular thing right now, but I do think that, it could be voice, could be multimodal, could be over video, whatever it is. There's a lot of interesting interactivity you could build into these agents as well. And they both go hand in hand, both the the fact that it's so good at handling different long tail use cases as well as interactivity. They sort of both work together to just create this really magical experience.
This is one of the best answers that I ever heard. And I really like that you split it in like for two different audiences. Because I think that most of the people, when they talk over each other, it's just because they are targeting, like they're looking at the UX or like the technical part. So it's good to have them
Yeah.
separately.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about product, right? So I try to dive a little bit, into kind of the deep dive into the technical aspects. You kind of have to, but I also spend a lot of time thinking about just interaction, essentially.
Something that I really liked is when you compare it to self-driving cars, because it gives this idea of a loop that it has a goal that it has to reach, and it's able to backtrack, and it doesn't fail, like has some recovery mode, try
Yeah,
multiple things. It doesn't have like a preloaded route that it's going to follow. It just says
exactly.
like, well, it's in that direction, let me check.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if the route is under construction, right, or if there's an accident, it knows how to reroute, basically.
Yeah. And for the UX part, it really matches my first experience with GPT-4. That whenever I asked for something and I saw the reply back, I was really, really happy because the first thing that came to my mind is like, okay, so this is it. These are going to be the major consumers of software. I don't care anymore where I have to click around. I will be able to say what I want. And if the software is able to do it, it will go and do it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think the analogy I really like, just thinking about it from a UX perspective, is it's always interesting to look at how developing countries use software, right? So there's this sort of there's almost like a little bit of like innovator's dilemma type of thing happening here. So just really quick, innovator's dilemma is essentially instances where a developed advanced country could actually potentially fall behind new innovation because they're so entrenched in sort of an existing paradigm, right? So this is why the West is so slow to adapt like mobile phones and smartphones and data. So there could be like a little bit of that happening as well, just in the standard software space. If you look at developing countries where, I mean, they still purchase the same software that developed country purchase. They still have their Salesforce, they still have their Oracle and, their Workday, whatever. But, but what they do is the executives actually don't use the software. They just have, these like, essentially these like really cheap interns or like personal assistants, right, that use the software for them, and they just tell their assistants what they want, right? And their assistant go and click all the buttons and then, give them back a report, right? Just because if you don't grow up using this type of software, just super unfamiliar, and it's just better to just tell somebody like what you actually want, and they can figure out how to interface with the software. So there's a little bit of that happening here as well, I think.
This is like the biggest paradigm shift that I have ever seen, but I still don't see it permeate even with people that are in AI. That is how what I would imagine, like the API for an agent is just like one endpoint that has
Yeah,
text. That it's basically like it allows me to put any input. That's actually how I work with people. No, like they tell me things, and I
exactly.
don't have like a specified set of tools, or I don't have something like an API that you have to call with a specific JSON. And now that we are able to actually have intelligence at the edges, really, really cheap, doing all this stuff, I think that the UI is going to go more in the direction that you are mentioning here.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, that's what we're building. So I don't know about other people, but that's the direction we're going.
So, talking about what you are building, what are you building?
So we're building autonomous agents for revenue teams. And essentially the idea here is that, you should be able to orchestrate any sort of revenue playbook with a simple prompt. Today there's so many different types of revenue products, right? You have your like sales intelligence product, you have your like email sequencers, you have your like data sources, and you have your like, orchestration tools, whatever. It's all super complicated. And there are actually dedicated roles within a revenue organization just responsible for using those SaaS software. So kind of think back on my analogy with Innovator's Dilemma, right? With the developing country. That's basically what's happening to every revenue org today. A whole department called RevOps, and now you have another department called Go-to-Market Engineering, who's just responsible for using all those tools to just like give the sales rep the right data. And my whole thesis is, okay, why are we building like these kind of small kind of tools for like RevOps to use? Why don't we just kind of abstract away the whole, that sort of whole function away altogether? Because you don't need a person to interface with the software. Like that person probably have better things to do than like click a bunch of buttons because the sales rep asked them to do something, right? Just have the AI just figure out that entire workflow for you. So the idea here is that, as a sales rep, if I have any sales play I want to run, like, I want to target this accounts, I need to deep dive into the research, and I need to figure out which contact matters to me, and I need to write there an email. Instead of asking my RevOps team to like set up the right tools for me, I just ask my AI agent. My AI agent go and figures it out. 30 minutes, give me a report with all the information I asked for.
Okay, so this is already a bit far off my own background. Is this something that big companies usually have, or it's already something like in medium-sized companies you can start seeing?
Yeah, so this is where, these departments I mentioned, the
Mhm.
RevOps and go-to-market engineering and the sales enablement. So these are where when your company gets to the growth stage, so typically after you have, 6 to 10 sales rep is usually when you should start pairing them up with these like support functions, right? Sales support functions, right? And those support functions are literally just there to manage all the tech stack, essentially.
I see. And right now, how does this tech stack look before your solution?
So before the solution, it's just very, what's the word here? The word I think of is it's a clusterfuck.
Okay, you can say that here. Don't worry.
Yeah. So, typically like a sales team has anywhere between like 5 to 20 pieces of software, right? Depending on how big the team is. And, and each software, like, following the typical SaaS playbook, every single piece of software just does like one very specific thing. And the humans, they're kind of orchestrating everything together and connecting the dots, right? And that's why, a sales rep needs a dedicated human support person, basically. Like a RevOps is basically tech support that just use all the sales software for them. So the sales rep don't waste their time like clicking around a bunch of buttons on like 10 different pieces of software.
How does the landscape then change with Omni?
I mean, where we want to go, is if you kind of look at a typical sales org today, they and you kind of stack rank how much time and resources spent doing any individual particular activity. The typical sales org only spend about like 30% of their time actually talking to customers, right? The rest of it is those other essentially back office jobs that I mentioned, right? Just like using the different tools and updating CRM and like doing some like pre-call research and enriching data, whatever it is. And our vision is to just have the agents do all of those. Right. So there's actually I mean I guess I should probably preface it by saying there's actually there's two opposing vision for where sales should go today. So I think anybody that has looked at AI sales software kind of knows about the concept of AI SDR, right? Which is we're gonna let the AI talk to all your customers for you, and as a human, we just configure the AI. We're actually the opposite, right? So we're the opposite approach. We're AI support function. So we're saying, we're gonna do all the support function for you. As a human, you just talk to the customer. So it's like literally the complete opposite, right? And then we think that's actually the better. We think that's actually the more sensible route to go, long term. I mean, especially in enterprise like B2B sales. Maybe for like consumer, for like e-commerce, you could get away with like an AI SDR because you're selling, kind of low ticket items. But anytime you start dealing with 5, 6, 7 figure deal sizes, I mean, ultimately you gotta build that relationship, right? And nobody's gonna feel good talking to a robot.
Yeah, when you are at enterprise level, it's not like as self-service as, like you just talk with a machine. And by the way, here is like 300 million, like in multi-year
Yeah, exactly.
deal
Yeah,
that I was.
exactly. So we want to empower the sales rep as much as possible, and we do that with kind of our AI agent.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Most of the companies that I have seen are actually following the SDR route, and you can see them in San Francisco, for example, like with all
Yeah,
the billboards and things like that.
yeah,
But most of the deals, like the ones that move most of the volume, are actually like enterprise deals.
exactly.
Humans are not going to be removed from there anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, you go to a typical enterprise company that does enterprise deals, generally anywhere between 60 to 80% of the revenue comes from the enterprise deals. So it's like that's the deal that actually matters. I think the AI SDR play, I do think there's a market for it. So don't get me wrong. So I don't want to like poo-poo on that play. I think there is a market for it. I think but it's not the end all be all of all future sales. It's kind of a fraction of sales going to move to AI SDRs, and you need to qualify it very, very precisely, like what exactly, like who will be there. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, but I think it's the category makes sense, and I think just from a marketing perspective, right, like it definitely gets people's attention. We're doing AI SDR, we're replacing people, but there's definitely many different ways of building AI agents for sales.
Makes sense. And then you started this company about 1 year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah, probably yeah, like a year and a half. Yeah, and then I think for like the first couple months, I was still trying to figure out if this is an actual company or just like a cool tech demo. So, I have a lot of like Twitter viral stories, and when the company first got started, when I just built a research agent that went viral. It's like a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
What was it, agent?
that was when the first agent I built was that was around the time when like a little bit after Baby AGI and AutoGPT came out, right? So I think that was what, May of last year, if I remember correctly. What I built was I took the same architecture and I basically just added a really nice UI, so made it really usable, so you don't have to like, use a terminal, right? I hosted it in a cloud provider, and I hooked it up to a message queue. So kind of I guess my main technical insight was these agents are basically just workflow orchestration systems, right? They have the same kind of reliability issues that a long running microservice type of workflows have. So you just like hook up to a microservice workflow orchestration system and it will be a lot more reliable. So my agent kind of became known as this like really user friendly, reliable agent that would actually give a result. This was back in the day when like half of your like AutoGPT run would just fail for like random reason, and mine's actually like working. So that really took off. I just got a ton of users, and yeah, that's kind of when I just started like thinking about if this should be a serious company or if this is just like a nice hobby basically.
This is nice, no? Because there were like many demos back then, but the main innovation of yours or the wow factor is like, well, it actually works.
Yeah, actually, exactly. Because I think everybody was making fun of agents for not working for a long time, right? And like, I'm always the one, that's actually just like really actually focused on reliability and adding in all this like production level like guardrails and retries and all that stuff to just get the reliability up as high as possible. And I was selling as enterprise software, right? So I was selling, it was not just like a open source tech demo. It was like an actual product that I'm getting enterprise customers to use. So they expect that 99% reliability. So that was kind of my main focus.
Yeah, they are not in a hackathon playing around. They say like,
Yeah,
well, this is for my job, so I need it to work. And back then, like, I guess that you were using something like ChatGPT 4 or something like that. Like, more or less is the time that it came out.
yeah, yeah. I started with like GPT 3.5.
Okay.
That was way, yeah. This was mid 2023 actually. It's not last year. It's 2023. So
Yeah, that
yeah,
sounds about right then with Baby
yeah.
AGI, like timelines. And how did this change? Like, I guess that back then you had to do like a lot of workflow, like you were designing the workflow more tailored that you need to do it today with the agents that we have? Or you say like, well, actually they are not still good enough for designing parts of the workflow. So still the human has to be in the loop for everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think my general thesis around the space is basically every year or just like every time the model capability doubles, you should just completely rewrite your product. We're literally doing that right now. We're completely rewriting our product right now because every time you get this like step function change in model capability, it means you could just delete a lot of the guardrails for agents for your agent. Like kind of going back to like what we were talking about earlier, I think that the end state of an agent is basically just take a model, give it a bunch of tools, give it an objective, and just tell it to go and figure it out. Right? It literally don't need anything else. It's literally just an LLM call with tool use, and that could just generalize to essentially any workflow. I mean, I think we're still quite far from that, but the and essentially the wrappers that you're building is a lot of it is just have just adding in the right guardrails, right? So it's like you're not really building a wrapper, you're really building scaffolding. That's kind of my analogy. I think it's a better analogy, right? So what you're doing is you're building scaffolding as you're building the product, you're building scaffolding for the AI model, and as the AI model grows, you remove scaffolding, right? Like one step at a time. So maybe like in 20 like late 2023, there was just like a shit ton of scaffolding. You can barely see like the AI that's underneath it, and now we like remove like more than half of the scaffolding. So you could they're still kind of there, right? It's just like kind of holding it up in the it's like so it doesn't fall down, right? But you could see most of the AI, like we let the AI kind of just run the show most of the time. And my guess is maybe when GPT-5 or 6 come out, we'll just do another big rewrite or just like delete all the scaffolding and we'll just have and essentially what we offer is just tools and data and we just feed that to the AI and the model will do the rest.
Yeah, I think that people like this is not in the background of people's mind, but it's already what it's hinting because if you saw the announcement of Sam Altman yesterday about how they are going to unify all their products and how it's going to be like one endpoint for everything, they are basically saying this like, guys, if we get AGI or we get like more intelligent machines, all you need is an endpoint where you say like, hi, this is what I need. Here is what you need to complete this task. And it can be things like what tools are used or things like what credentials you need to use my tools
Right.
and go and do it. And if we have intelligence in an API, I think that it's going to look like quite a lot like with one endpoint. Like we don't need all. And you talk a lot about tool calling. Do you think that that's here to stay, or it's going to morph in something that is more like writing code? Because let me load a bit the question. Tool calling is pretty useful for the LLM to say like, well, I want to execute some code. Go and do it. However, it makes things hard like chaining because everything is just text. Something that is really, really easy with code that it's like go to GitHub, iterate over all my repositories and close the ones that don't have an issue open in the last 1 year. This is really like fairly easy with code, like with 50 lines of code of Python, you can do it. And you are working with a lot of variables. You just say like, well, here is how you get and paginate my repositories. I don't care which ones they are. I only know that I'm going to iterate with them. With tool calling, it's really, really hard to do this because you need to pass the output of one to the other one. And I have used quite a lot of function generation, of saying like, well, generate Python for this and then execute it. Do you see this happening, or it's still early, or you think that it will never happen?
I think you could probably make good argument for both techniques. I think that I do think that the whole like coding as tool calling, that whole technique is kind of underused right now. I mean, just because the main API, like the main model providers don't really suggest that, right? It's just purely, I think like some open source model does, and there's like some research papers about it. But yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to basically say that, to kind of map out your tool calling workflows as basically, a set of function calls, right? And maybe it's like, instead of generating tool calls, you generate like a Python, script, and it will just run the Python script. I do think that there needs to be mechanisms to kind of feed any errors back to the model, right? So it can modify the script as needed. Because the advantage of tool calling right now is it's a tool calling right now works really well because it's a stupidly simple system. And yes, it's very inefficient, but it does handle the long tail use cases very well, right? So it's just really good at showing off like what the model is really good at, even though it's like stupidly unoptimized and inefficient and use a shit ton of tokens. So I actually think right now that inefficient approach, it's like, think about it as the MVP approach, is the right approach. But yeah, in the future, like especially if you have like a very vertical specific use cases, I think it probably is I mean, it might be a combination of both, right? Like, for long running, long running sort of tool chains where the model is pretty confident that it just needs to execute these kind of commands in sequence. It will write like a tool call script, and then it will also just do its own tool call as well to adapt to any like user feedback or user changes. I don't think it's one way or other, basically. And I
Yeah.
think it's too early to say which one is the right way for me. Or I mean, if you have to choose, I would just choose the inefficient tool call way, just because that's the one with the mainstream support from the AI labs, basically.
100%. Like right now, the way to go for sure is it's tool calling. And
Yeah,
whenever we have to do things, like we already package it in nice tools for it to
yeah,
call. But the other approach like allowed us to do like something really, really cool. For example, like we took the Replit agent a couple of weeks ago and we made it purchase a domain. And the Replit agent, it's not supposed to do that, but it was able to write code and execute it.
nice.
So it was able to do it without any function calling. By now, it's still more of a hack, but I think that big labs soon will start having saying like, okay, like this LM is able to manage variables. It's able to, like think at a bigger level. That it's basically how people do it. Like when I think about this program, about iterating about all my repositories, I don't care about the repositories. I am like one level abstracted. And
Right.
it looks like the LLMs are not there yet because we didn't figure it out how to put variables in the scope and how to have things like environment and execution environment for them. So right now it's delegated to the caller. And it's like, well, I'm going to tell you what function I want to call. You go and implement
Yeah.
it
Yeah. Exactly.
and do it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way. That is the way that you guarantee that the LLM has like all the context, right? So I think maybe the unlock for better code execution by LLM, right, to kind of just replace tool calls is just there probably needs to be some like better APIs between the code execution environment, so it could feed back any outputs, or just like essentially essentially what the environment looks like back to the LLM, so it could modify the code anytime it needs to. I said right now, like, that's still kind of janky.
Like until a big lab, like this is going to come from a big lab. I would not spend too much time trying to, figure this out because eventually it's going to be like OpenAI or Anthropic or XAI that's like now the LLM has this environment for executing stuff.
Yeah.
And these ideas, they just get implemented by them and we're able to all benefit without much engineering from our side. So in the last 6 months, there was a big jump on the kind of models that we treat with test time computing or inference. Did this change a lot how you were building agents?
Excuse me. Well, it definitely made me believe in my thesis more, that the thesis is basically removing guardrails and just really lean into the model. Well, I mean, I think the lesson that I keep learning as I'm building this stuff is essentially never bet against the model. It's I mean, it kind of just goes back to kind of, you should always rewrite your software, from scratch every time the model capability doubles. It's just like, essentially just don't bet against the model. I think now we really figured out a way to predictably scale your reasoning capabilities, right? I mean, even with the first generation reasoning models, right, you could just tune the reasoning effort from like low, medium, high, and and you actually get like some pretty significant difference in results. I think that just and you could just easily see on the roadmap, right? Like, that could just that's already just that alone is already scalable to. I mean, OpenAI I think is scalable to AGI, and like maybe yes, maybe no, but either way, right? You could go very far with just that capability alone. So it just made me essentially. That's probably those announcements in a small way sort of drove me to just make the decision to that I need to just completely refactor my system because I just need to get my system ready for the next generation of these models. So yeah.
When you rewrite the systems, is basically the backend, or it also changes the things that you can show in the screen or how you can interact with the user?
We're doing both. So before, where our system was more about generating a static report. So that if you ask our system to do research on a company, we hard code what a company research would mean for you, right? Because the models are not smart enough to know that, okay, if I need to like research a company, I should use these data sources and find these specific information. Now we just let the model make all that decision. That was the next version of the product. So yeah, so it's kind of a lot of these type of decisions that we're just gonna feel way more confident giving the model. So so I said now, there's still a little bit hard coding. Maybe there's still a specific like pieces of information we want the AI to really focus on, so we kind of hard code that workflow. But I would say it's probably like 70% of the research direction is driven by the AI and like 30% hard coded by us, whereas before it's like 100% hard coded by us. So yeah, so I think that's just something that I think as we sort of keep developing, the ultimate goal is to just essentially turn our what we're building is really just tools for the model. And I think at the limit, for us, we're building model scaffolding, and what that really means is just giving the model the right tool set, right? So it could kind of basically use whatever we're building to accomplish its goals. I mean, that's the in the long term, that's more or less what we're focused on.
I never heard that before or express it in this way, and I think that you nailed it. That is this idea of one, don't bet against the model. That's yeah, like that's
Right.
there are some people that they seem to want their business crash because they are solving something that is like I would not spend time on that. Like what I said now with environment for executing code is like this is going to come from the big labs and they're going to like we're getting there. But the other one is this focus on, well, right now we need to do some scaffolding for the product because we want to serve our customers, but we think that in the future it's going to be a lot on tooling and data. And I think that this is really like future proofed because something that I always like to say about my company is that most of the people that think that Stripe is our competition, we work on payments, or Visa is our competition, I always say like, well, I build it in such a way that when they have a new product, my life gets easier, not worse.
Right.
And with AI, it's the same. Like if you are betting against the model, like I know people that get mad when they say like, oh, Sam has another announcement. My startup is destroyed. You should be building in a way that you get excited every time that there is a new thing because you're like, well, this is going to make my product so much better.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very tempting for people to like just add AI on top of existing paradigms, on top of existing categories of software. I mean, if you do that, then the incumbents are going to have a way bigger advantage, right? I think as a startup, you kind of have to see a little bit more into the future, kind of see where the model's going. And maybe right now it's a little bit janky, it's a little bit slow, it's like really token inefficient. That's what you're betting on, right? Don't bet. You don't want to bet on the fact that models are never going to improve and get cheaper because it will, right? So if you spend all this engineering effort building guardrails and optimizing for cost in 2 months, like those whatever you build, it's just going to be completely out of date.
Yeah, better, cheaper, and faster is what you should be betting on
Yeah.
for anything that it's AI related right now. And you should say like, well, if this gets like 10 times cheaper, better, and faster, what should I build here? Something that I also piqued my interest that you just said is that at some point you build some kind of researcher that you said like, well, I want to learn about this company, and it came back with a report. You built that about 1 year ago.
Right.
Then now you built a new version of that it's
Right.
open source and it's not only for companies.
Right. So now it's a more generalized version. It's actually pretty interesting too. So yeah, so I have another. I guess I'm like the AI research guy because I just released another open source AI researcher, essentially like the open source equivalent of OpenAI's deep research, just kind of applying a lot of the same philosophies that I talked about, which is don't bet against the model, let it make as many decisions as possible, just kind of, don't give it guardrails, just kind of let it follow its own curiosity. So, and essentially the new version of the research repo that I built is actually way simpler than the original research repo that I went viral for like 1.5 years ago.
Okay.
There's like in the original research repo, new research product, right? 1.5 years ago, like I was dealing with GPT-4, GPT 3.5. There were probably like 20 to 30 like different prompts, different LLM calls, essentially in that whole process. Because I had to add so many guardrails, and I'm doing reflection, right? So the LLM can reflect. Like I have another model reflect an output of a previous model. I have like an editor model to give critique and give feedback, right? You sort of, like your typical, architecture that like I think people call it an agent swarm now, whatever that is. But it's essentially this like kind of this kind of architecture where you have these different personas and they kind of all add their best sort of their sort of best their best skills and all contribute like a unique skill to make this final report. And it worked out pretty well. It worked out pretty well, but it's still very heavily guardrailed, right? Like I don't let it actually do that deeper research because even with reflection and even with like all these like, editors and whatever, it still tend to kind of go off the rails a little bit too much just because even GPT-4 back then wasn't, it still tends to kind of talk itself into a loop. Fast forward to the current version, like the current version is literally just two LM calls. It's literally just two LM calls running in a loop. And that's pretty much it. Like I think that's actually the reason why it took off because I think people are surprised at how simple it is. Like the main core logic is like 200 lines of code. I think people like because I think people are so used to these like complicated like agent swarm architecture, right, to get like the best result and whatever, right? Because I mean, but to me, like all this like, agent swarm shit, that's a bug. That's not a feature. Like if you need to have like all these LM calls to do like reflection and validation, whatever, do like LM guardrails and whatever, right? That's that just tells me that the system just isn't good enough to run by itself, right? You need to kind of add all this extra baggage behind it, and the more baggage you add, the less the actual system could do, right? The less flexible you make it because you're hard coding those kind of guardrails. So the new version, like it's literally, you give a objective to the deep research agent. Now it does this web research. It produces a bunch of learnings, right? So that's the second LM call produces those learnings. The learnings gets fed back to that same LM call, right? That kind of at first called, and it just kind of runs recursively. It's just this continuous recursive process of do some research, produce learnings, do some more research, produce more learnings, and then the other part that I added so it does it both recursively as well as in parallel. So when it does its second round of research, it could say, you know what, I have like 5 pieces of learnings, and I want to follow all 5 different threads, right? So instead of just running it once recursively, I'm going to run it 5 times recursively, and each time it's going to be going to a different research direction, right? So kind of it could go very deep as well as go very wide. So that's why that's why the in the setting of the repo, there's apart from the initial prompt, there's only two other settings, which is the depth of the research and the breadth of the research, right? So like how deep you want to dive to a specific topic and how wide do you want to go. Like how curious should the agent be, basically is the breadth. But yeah, but it's like a stupidly simple architecture and it works way better than my first architecture, which is like 10 times more complex. So yeah, I thought that was actually like an interesting comparison, right? So that's like a good analogy of where we are now and what the best practice for developing agent is now versus where it was like even 6 months ago, where people are still obsessed with this like multi-agent swarm stuff.
Yeah, I think that simplicity is going to win, and the big part of it is this idea of like we are really automating intelligence, so don't bet against the model.
Yeah.
Like most of the things that we think that okay, let's try this, the model can try by itself, and it will be able to come up with better ideas by itself after trying than you in a morning. So how do people usually use this deep research tool? So they just like configure it, run it, they put their API key for one of the big models, and then after 5 minutes it's done, or there is some kind of back and forward and input while it's executing?
I mean, there's some back and forth at the beginning. So the other thing I did is, I mean, similar to OpenAI's deep research tool, I think people are pretty bad at asking questions in general. Usually the questions don't have nearly enough context. So it's actually best practice is to have the AI ask questions back to the user to clarify, right? Because like a lot of people use it to research other AI initiatives. Like people have used the deep research tool to ask about OpenAI's new, O3 mini model, right? But a lot of time when you type in that query and people don't realize if they just say O3 mini, what does that actually mean? Right? Maybe to them it's obvious, like that's of course the AI model, but O3 mini could also be the model of a car, right? Or it could be the model of like some like vacuum cleaner. Like who knows, right? It's like it's such a common word. So like are you talking about O3 mini, the AI model, or O3 mini, the vacuum cleaner? So you kind of need to ask that, give that feedback to the agents. That's the other big unlock is, just I think now the models is smart enough where it can actually ask very good follow-up questions and it should actually guide the user in sort of helping the user kind of home in on their objectives. So that's actually a very critical, like it sounds very simple and dumb, but it's actually really important to make sure it goes the direction you want it to go.
There is something that really helped me to explain things better to AI, that it's Mac Whisper. So I noticed that one big barrier is just having to type
Yep.
versus if I just go into a random rumble by pushing one button in my keyboard and then like speaking to the machine.
Yeah, I love Whisper. Yeah.
I am able to do like to give more context without even noticing. That was one of the biggest unlocks of 2025 for me. And also, something that is really interesting is what you said about, well, O3 Mini may mean a lot of things, but by context in this conversation, we already know what we were not talking about the car model. Models right now seem to, every time it's a fresh conversation. Like every time that you talk about O3 Mini, well, maybe it's about the car. What about your product? Do you have some kind of memory for the agent that it's able then to, like for each task, you don't need to repeat a lot of stuff? Or you think that this is going to come from the big models later?
I mean, I think that is the other key part of building a product, right? If you building the scaffolding is providing the right context, right? So the context is everything. And context is about that is about giving the AI enough information so it knows when I talk about O3 Mini, I'm talking about the AI model, not the car. And and that's and that's something that every AI native product should think very hard about, right? Because there's many different ways of doing that, right? So you could like just explicitly ask the user, which our product actually does. Like when you sign up for my product for the first time, we actually ask you a bunch of questions about what you're trying to sell, so we get that context, right? So you could just explicitly ask the question to the user, or you could just do it in like an ambient way. Some like personal assistant products doing that, like they import in the email, they import in your conversations, whatever, creating a knowledge graph in the background, which also give it context. I mean, I think that's actually something that the frontier, the labs will not do, right? Because that's something that's so application and vertical specific. And that's actually, I mean, honestly, that's probably the main job of if you're building the AI scaffolding application, like your main job is to feed the right models, right? Beside the guardrails and the tools, like your other main job is to feed the model the right context so it can perform its best.
Do you see the big labs coming with something for memory and context, or you think that they are going to let this pass? Because I see pretty core for their product too.
Maybe on the infrastructure side, right? So I agree. Like probably maybe on the infrastructure side, they'll have like I mean, Anthropic is kind of going there with their model context protocol, and and maybe they have a way to now store memories as well, and I think there's a bunch of different directions you could go. So I think that they could I mean, that's such an important that's such an important piece of infrastructure. I won't be surprised if they just try to take that on, but it's still up to the AI application to figure out what the right user experience is and like what the right mechanism is to get that context from the user. Like, because there's like a million different ways of doing that. So the AI labs will not get into that side. They'll probably just, I think they'll go as far as like a database for storing memories.
What do you think about MCP? Like, do you like it? Do you think that's something that's needed?
I think it's super cool. I think it makes sense, like like an extensible memory protocol. I don't think there's that much of a community behind it, as far as I can tell. I mean, I have some friends who's like super into it, but I mean, it will be amazing if every company could get behind it and instead of signing up for a piece of SaaS, you would just sign up for like a NCP, endpoint that you can hook into your model. Like that would be a cool feature. Also, I don't think the company wants to do that because that would just relegate the company to like just tool makers, right? Like on top of the AI platform. So there's like a lot of like competitive dynamics here that needs to get worked out. Um, so I don't know if there's a future for it. It's definitely taking off kind of slowly, but I think it's a super cool concept.
I think that it's solving like a critical problem, that it's integration of software. No? At some point, I just want to say like, I want to use this tool. So usually it's the browser. For LLMs. What is that? That I said like, this is the software. Go and use it. I see. So that's already really really cool. ChatGPT already came with something similar for plugins, but never took off.
Yeah, yeah, and both OpenAI and Anthropic are trying to, because everybody wants to be a platform, right? So like they both, MCP and you know ChatGPT has a plugin, they have the GPTs or the GPT store, whatever it is. Everybody wants to do like a platform play. And of course, everyone else is resistant because nobody wants to just be an app on a platform. So I think the market just needs to kind of work its way kind of to a steady state. It's still too early to know who's going to win there.
Yeah, I hope like the winner though, it's something that is even like simpler than MCP. That it's literally like one endpoint. Here is the text. Here is the session ID the conversation that I am having with you. Here are my auth keys. Now, like
Yeah.
it's only one endpoint. So, there's not all this tooling and all these JSONs and all these blobs. But what it's for sure is that the problem that MCP is solving needs to be solved somehow. So I don't know if it's going to be MCP, the one that takes it. And then there is one that it's like highly related, that it's service discovery, which none of them seem to have caring, like they don't care to solve it. It's like, well, this is an MCP. Go and install the MCP that you want to use, and then you can use it. And you're like, well, why? Why can I just like tell the LLM what I want, and it can tell me like, oh, these are the offers, these are the payments, what are you interested in? So that's also something that we will see how it goes. But
Yeah.
authentication, it's a
It's
big
not
part.
it's not very good at service discovery. I agree. I ran into this issue with my current product actually is that I wanted to build a service discovery layer, like a discovery tool for the model, because I don't just want to jam. I have like 20 tools. I don't want to jam them all into the model context, right? Because that's going to confuse it. But I think the model needs to be a little bit to be fine-tuned a little bit better because it doesn't have the instinct to run the service discovery tool before it gives up. It never uses it, no matter how hard you ask it. Sometimes you could get it to do it, but it's not going to be 99% reliable. Not as reliable as just giving them all the raw tools directly.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something like, yeah, that's also just something that the frontier labs need to tune the model a little bit better on, which is some sort of service discovery behavior right into the models. So it knows to call that to get as solicit tools I could call.
There is a paper that we have discussed internally for a while that we may want to write, that it's plain text is all you need. Did you actually think about having a tool that it's just like, well, you ask me what you want to do. I know how to use Expedia. I know how to do search. I know how to do purchase. You don't worry about the parameters. If some are missing, I will ask you.
Right. Yep.
Did you play with this idea, or you try to use just service discovery and then like load the tools at runtime to the agent?
Mine's just pretty simple. I just have a service discovery tool which will then load other tools to the agent depending on what the agent search for. But that didn't work. So now I'm just back to, I have just like a big like 8,000 token context of all the tools I have and just attach it to the model on every call.
I don't know if all three already has tool calling. Does it?
It does, but it's pretty horrible. It's pretty bad.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not as surprising. Sonnet is still holding up really well as my main tool calling model.
Okay. Perfect. And last thing that I would like to ask as a big question is this idea of, okay, so you have these agents running in name of your people. So your SaaS now it's agent based. So they go to the browser, they're able to touch stuff, and when they click a button, instead of going to a view that calls a controller that changes a row in a database, there's actually like some agent that it's doing stuff in the background. How do you monitor and like do error reporting on this? How do you test? Well, we are improving. Do you have like internal metrics on how these guardrails, like you saw, like every time that there is a model released, I am able to remove some of them. Is this like vibe driven? Like, I think that I can already remove this.
I mean, everybody says that they have all these eval data sets and whatever, and we have our eval data sets as well, right? Like we have our, we do a bunch of stuff on Landfuse, but we also have just our own eval script that we kind of wrote custom. And, there's like there's like we have our like a big, I think our eval data set is probably more lines of code than like our actual product at this point.
I believe that.
But at the end of the day, it's vibes. It's like, at the end of the day, it's just so much of it. It's a lot of it's really hard to eval, to be honest. Like, how do you? A lot of the time, a lot of times, like I'll give you an example, right? Where one of our evals is I have a prompt and AI should call this set of tools whenever it uses prompt. So because one of the eval, how good is that using the tools that we give it? So the eval is, kind of hard coded, have this like hard coded sequence of tools. We'll do like a web search, we'll do like this web browse, and then we'll use this other tools like, do like some contact enrichment or whatever. And then, when we switch over to another model, this other model actually still managed to do the job correctly. So it failed the eval, right? It still managed to do the job correctly, but just called the tools in like a completely different order, and it just skipped like some tools altogether and like use some other tools.
Okay.
Like if that's the case, like is that like does that model like is actually doing a better job than the previous model, even though it failed the eval, right? So I think there's just a lot of I think so basically I think like any time you have these like any calls that you have sort of that's a critical part in your pipeline. I sure have the eval, right? Like just sort of like the base layer of checks. But ultimately everything still comes down to the vibes, and you still just need to spend a shit ton of time just writing your own hand-coded script that runs through all these scenarios, and you personally review the data to make sure it actually works. Because actually a lot of times your eval data set could be worse. As the model gets smarter, it should actually be proving your eval data set wrong, because like, no, that's not the way to do it. I have this better way to do it. Like you should update your eval data set. So
Yeah.
I had a couple instances where that happened already. So I think you're not going to be vibes.
Yeah. We talked last week with Ocario that they have like a product for this, and it's really, really cool when you can see like, okay, from one model to the other, you can improve all the metrics, and it has like quite a lot of rails to say like, okay, this is what needs to be in this data set and not this other crap that it's just circumstantial. However, something that is really interesting here is this idea of, because we are automating intelligence, most of the time, even the kind of data sets that we can create, for the next model, we should actually ask, listen, how should we check that you are better? And, like it would be able to come with a better pipeline than the one that we do in a Saturday morning.
That's where the vibes comes in, right? So, maybe maybe the corollary to like you should rewrite your agent every time model performance doubles. Also, you should just completely like
Even
redo your eval data set, right? To make sure just do an extra vibe check to make sure the data set is actually still relevant every time the model performance doubles.
So I was happy every time that there is a new announcement, but now that I know that I need to rewrite all my data set and all my product every time, I don't know if I'm going to be excited every time.
So that's what keeps it exciting,
Yeah, pretty great. So thank you very much, David. Looking forward to learn more about, like what you are building. So let's have a chat in the future. How can people learn more about what you are building today, and how can they find you?
Yeah, so definitely check out our product, Aomni. So that's AOMNI.com. So there's an A in front of it that's silent. So yeah, so we recently have the best agents for revenue teams. That's basically going to help you really easily run any sort of revenue related sales plays. And our AI agent will just put everything together for you, orchestrate it for you, and just report back the results. I'm also I have a decent following on Twitter. I try to tweet about, I don't know, random AI agent building adventures. I don't know, maybe you could just add my Twitter to the description or something.
Excellent. We can do that. In the show notes, people can find it.
Yeah.
Do you want to spell it now?
It's
Like what?
yeah, it's DZHNG. It's just basically like my name was the vowels removed. So it's a bit hard to pronounce.
Perfect, but it's pretty easy to, like when it's spelled. So, between that and the show notes, I'm sure that people will be able to find you.
Awesome.
Excellent. So thank you very much. Looking forward to know more about you.
Thank you, Jordi. All right. See ya. Bye.